All right, I am live. Well, here we are. 2 Tuesdays in a row. I've actually managed to get a live stream going, so I'm pretty proud of myself. Got a few things done this week, not nearly as much as I had hoped, but I mentioned last week in the middle of all the stuff I had planned and had to get done and was pretty well buried with. I'd got a case of peaches, and I did manage to get them canned. Turned out pretty nice. Got a real nice color to the syrup there and taste real good. They were good peaches to begin with, so pretty sweet. So I canned them up in more of a medium syrup and came out really nice. Did find a couple of nice things out when I was out and about during the week, and I'll show them to you in a minute. I'm going to talk a little bit about that dog didn't make a single sound for the last 2 hours, and now he's yapping and barking because I'm on air. Because he just wouldn't be a dog otherwise. Let me go get him and shut him up, and I'll be right back. Get in here and shut up, you wretched little beast. Yeah. Just one of you. No, you don't get any treats for bugging me. No treats for bothering me. Anyway, let me get myself blocking the sun there for you. Yeah, the peaches turned out real nice. Got a real pretty color to them. They got more of a reddish color to the syrup than they usually do, because the peaches were pretty red when I got them, and I like them. Turned out nice. Let's see who all we got here. Jay Watterson, good to see you. Debbie, Billy Lee Lawn, Mike Newby, Druid Lover, nice to see you, Druid. Brina 1971, 6 drops, good to see you as always. Let's see, and that's who we got so far watching, and 23 other people, 26 now. Yeah, I'm on a few Facebook groups, cast iron Facebook groups. One of them's pretty good. I really like it. But a lot of the ones you run across, one of the problems you run into is you get some real dogmatic people on there. They absolutely believe it must be this way, and no sort of dissent will be tolerated. And no, I'm not going to play along with that sort of foolishness. There's a lot of myths around cast iron. And there's a few things that you should never actually do to cast iron. There's a lot of things you shouldn't do, but there's rare exceptions. And like I said, when it comes especially to using and maintaining and cleaning cast iron on a regular basis, there's a lot of myths about it. A lot of people believe you should never use soap on it. Well, in the olden days, that was kind of true. If you had some harsh homemade lye soap that had a lot of excess lye in it, it would tend to strip the pans. But even then, it wasn't really all that harmful. And nowadays, we're not using lye soap anymore. We use detergent. And you're fine to scrub them in the sink, as long as you don't leave them in there and let them rust for a week. You're fine to leave them sit in the sink for a while, soak them, scrub them off with dishwashing detergent, and dry them on the stove and re-oil them when you're done. That's just fine. But it doesn't hurt not to use soap on them. If you think the only way you can clean your cast iron is with a half a potato and some coarse salt and scrubbing it with that, well, that's fine. It's not going to really hurt anything as long as you dry it good, because you get some moisture from the potato. But, actually the starch from the potato does kind of help build your seasoning up for you. So most of the myths are pretty harmless. Even when it comes to things like sanding a pan. You should never sand or grind or wire wheel a pan to try and clean it off when you're restoring it. You can end up destroying logos, wiping out any value that it has. And it doesn't, a lot of times it's actually more work to mess around with a grinder with a wire wheel trying to knock the crud off a pan and get it cleaned up than it is just to throw it in a lye bath and let it soak for a couple of days. So, you should never sand a pan. You never really have to. Pitting isn't really a problem when it comes to having a pitted cooking surface. Usually isn't a problem. But in rare instances, and I've done videos on this, you'll come across something that has some super fine pitting that almost acts like Velcro. And you just have to take a sander and lightly sand it just enough to knock the sharpness off of that fine pitting, and you're fine. And like Billy sees, there's someone in one of my groups, probably one of the guys I'm thinking about, that says made in USA shouldn't be used for dating cast iron. Like Griswold, the large logos and that, they say Erie, PA, USA, but they don't say made in USA. The made in USA became a requirement. In the early 1960s, a law was passed that any imported or exported items had to have the country of origin stamped on them. And that's really when it started. And if me and Billy Lee are thinking of the same person, he insists that pretty much every variation of lodge skillet was made between 1960 and 1992. You can show them a 3-notch lodge with the blob logo, a hand incised number, something that's everybody swears is from the 1930s. He says no, that's from 1960 up to 92. And it's pretty dogmatic kind of thought on that sort of thing, and it really gets silly sometimes. And it really turns people off to cast iron when you run into anything, any kind of group. But you do tend to see that on Facebook and a lot of things like that. And it gets to be a pain. There's, a good reason to not encourage people to spread stupidity. You shouldn't clean up a cast iron pan with a sandblaster. It's a bad idea. And you should try and nip bad ideas in the bud. But, the really rigid sort of thinking on it, allowing for absolutely no exceptions to anything, really gets to be kind of a pain. I was considering, I have a Facebook page for my members, and I haven't really done a lot with it. I usually post, when I'm going to put up a video or a live stream, but I haven't done much else with it. And, there's not that many people that are actual channel members, which is a broad hint to hopefully encourage others to join so the folks who are members don't get lonely. And I've considered opening it up to the public, but I don't want to have to deal with this kind of foolishness. So, if you want to join a Facebook cast iron group or something like that, go ahead, check it out, look around, see what kind of information is out there. Take everything with a grain of salt. And if you see people that are really rigidly thinking, trying to enforce extremely rigid rules to the point where you're going against common sense, just leave. Don't play along. Learn what you can, the stuff that seems to be accurate, and double check everything. But you don't need to put up with, real strict dogmatic thinking. And if everybody in the world did that, we'd probably be in a lot better shape. But anyway, I did find a few. Let me back up here a little bit in the comments, see if there's any questions. Yeah, you gotta love the dogs. Hasn't made a noise in 2 hours until I actually start the camera, and then he starts the yapping. He expects to be rewarded for it when I bring him in too. Eating pizza you made in your cast iron pizza pan. Yeah, it makes a real nice crust. They especially if you oil it a little bit of olive oil first, and get her good and hot. It really crispies the bottom of that crust up nice. Homestead Jen, good to see you. Always wash yours with soap, dry on the stove, and lightly coat. Yeah, I mean, that's perfectly fine. That's the way I usually do it. You know, you only have to clean cast iron as much as it needs to be cleaned. If there's nothing stuck to it, if you just fried a couple of eggs and there's nothing stuck to the iron, just pour off any excess grease and wipe it down good with a dry cloth and get all the excess oil off of it, and you're fine. But if it needs a little scrubbing, go ahead and give it a little scrubbing with soap and water. You're not going to hurt anything. Let's see. Yeah, maybe the dog had something to say to the audience as well. Yeah, bark, 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 bark. And once he gets going, he just won't quit until you actually do something. Anyway, the stuff I found, I'll start with this guy. I found a nice little number 6 Sydney. Now, Sydney is kind of an interesting story. This one was actually made by Ware, and we'll get to that in a bit. But a fellow named Smith started a foundry back in about 1859, made stoves, quite a few different items, a whole lot of different things. And he got big into the stove business, and it got so big that he kind of split off the stove business and moved that into Marion, I think it was Marion, Indiana. He was based in Sydney, Ohio, along with Ware. But in 1888, he added on to his foundry in Sydney and started making hollowware, you know, skillets, pots, things like that. And they're real nice. But I got a couple of different pictures here I could show you. Let me bring this up. Here's one. Up here. Camera's in the way. I want to share my screen. I got a couple of different ones here. This one here. That's the Sydney block logo. It says Sydney Hollowware Company, Sydney O. And that's a number 10 skillet there. But what they're really best known for was the, close that and bring this one up. Oh, that's the wrong one. Hold it. I got it. Hang on here. I'm screwing things up already. That's the one I want. Okay. Stop sharing. One more time. Come on, what are you doing? It doesn't want to share. Doesn't want to share that one, and that was the coolest one. There we go. What they're really famous for is the Sydney script logo. So they got this cool cursive script, Sydney O. Now, the Sydney Hollowware Company was in business up until, where's this sharing? There we go. Finally got it moving. Not seeing it. Now you can see it. Yeah, the Sydney script logo, they made this, you know, from about 1888 when they started up into the mid 1890s. They were only in business for about 10 years. And I'll show you the block logo one here if I can. Yeah, if I can without completely screwing this up. Bring this one up. That was the script logo. Share. There we go. And that's the Sydney block logo. There's a couple of variations of both. This one has the, Sydney in an arc. Then there's kind of a straight logo one too. But anyway, they were only in business for about 10 years. And about 1898, 1899, they were bought out by Wagner, who started to use the Sydney name on skillets like this. And rather than being the really highly polished, highly finished ones that the Sydney Hollowware Company made, they're more of an economy brand. They're a little bit not quite as nicely finished. There's a couple variations of the Wagner Sydneys. This one is in the center. Some of them were up high. And I believe there's one that had a star as well. That's a nice little number 6. And Wagner Ware made these up until there's some kind of debate on how long exactly they ran with it. Probably up until the early 19 teens, maybe as long as 1920. But this, you can see, that's from an older style Wagner Ware pattern. It's got the big reinforcement on there. And this is probably a pretty early one from the early 1900s. So it's kind of nice to find something like that. Number 6, or actually it's an upside down 9, I think. But I've always wanted one of these, so I finally found one. I really want to get a Sydney script logo one, or even a block logo. That's kind of interesting. And I think the reason why Wagner quit making the Sydney name is they're kind of competing against their own national economy brand. And there's no sense in competing against yourself. I mean, it's okay to have one brand that's an economy brand and then your main flagship brand. But when you're splitting the market between two different, don't you start now, you big lummox. But there's no sense in trying to split the market between two of your own economy brands. Yeah, I've never seen the script loader. They're pretty scarce. I mean, they usually go for pretty big money when you do find them. And they're from around 1890, 1888 when they started. And they only made them, the first few years. And the whole company was only in business for 10 years. So, they're kind of hard to come by. And if you ever do come across a Sydney Hollowware skillet, they made pots, waffle irons, scotch bowls, a few other things. So if you ever come across something like that at a good price, it's definitely worth getting a hold of it. I've ever heard of a Techsport cast iron griddle. Someone gifted it to me. Yeah, Techsport, they're kind of an outdoor brand. They're made more for camping. They're usually fairly hefty, kind of rough. They're not too bad usually. I mean, they're definitely usable, but they're not a really highly finished one. And it's not something you're going to be terribly heartbroken if you end up leaving it behind at your campsite and forgetting about it. They're fairly inexpensive. Techsport, they make quite a few different things. Cabela's has a brand of cast iron. Most of them are made in China. And, they're definitely usable. They're not the highest quality you're going to find, but they're great for camping and things like that. Cabela's, Techsport, Ozark Trail is another one. And a lot of times you'll find them in sporting goods stores in the camping section. That's kind of what they're made for. Something, decent enough to cook on that is still fairly inexpensive that you can take a beating out in the campground. Okay. Yeah, Sydney, Ohio is best known for their Motel 6 right off Route 75. Yeah, they're famous for that too. And I'm sure you have been there a few times yourself there, haven't you, Six? Reclusive Mountain Man. Hey, you caught a live feed. Good to see you. Is that number 6 a little on the thin side? Yeah, it's a nice light pan. I mean, even the economy brands, from the early 1900s are real thin, light, and they're not bad, or they're not junk. I mean, usually you can hardly tell the difference between the the cheaper ones and the their main flagship brands like Victor's. Victor's are nice pans. They were made by Griswold. A lot of times what they would do, I think, is they would use some of the older patterns they had laying around that were getting pretty worn. And you see this a lot of times with the unmarked skillets from pretty much all manufacturers. They would tend to use some of their more worn out or some of their older patterns that they didn't make exactly that style anymore. And they'd clean them up and try and get as much use out of them as they could. by making their economy brand pans out of them. Ms. Parker, nice to see you. Where'd you go here? There I am. Anyway, I also got an unmarked, speaking of unmarked stuff, this is an unmarked favorite chicken fryer with a lid. Now, you can really, you can tell when you come across an unmarked favorite because of the heat ring on it. That style of heat ring, you know, it almost looks like they started off with a smooth bottom and then it's indented in the middle, and it's a real wide, kind of rounded over heat ring where, I'll use that little Sydney, where most everything else that has an outside heat ring like that, you know, it's a narrow, sharp heat ring. But the favorites, and you see this on their regular mark stuff, have a real wide, kind of rounded over on the bottom heat ring on it. So you can always tell if it's a favorite, even if it's got a lot of buildup on it. Might not be able to tell if it's marked or unmarked, but the heat ring is pretty distinctive on them. And it's got a lid. And I love favorite skillet lids because they got these big lugs on it that keep it from sliding around on the skillet when you tip the skillet. And they're just wonderfully brutal looking. They got them big lugs on it, and they got the broken drip rings in there, and they're fairly easy to spot. The skillet lids are like this, but the favorite Dutch oven lids usually tend, set him down, to look more like this, only round. This is the lid off that great big roaster of mine. You know, favorite Dutch oven lids are usually shaped like that, and the ridge in the middle works for a drip ring. Another way you can spot favorite lids is the handle. They got these kind of teardrop shaped bases to it, and usually they're two-piece. Maybe you see it better on this side. They're usually two pieces. You see that little seam in the middle? They cast these pieces separately because it's a pain to try and cast this in one piece, you know, get an impression and get something through here and have it come out right. So a lot of times what they would do is they would cast these separate, and they would put these in the mold after they took the impression of the lid, you know, the pattern for the lid. They would put these in and cast around it. And they usually had little nubs on the bottom that would melt into the iron when you poured the molten iron in the mold. But anyway, set him down. And that's what I got for things that I found so far. Stripping down your single notch because someone in the house doesn't know how to buff off the excess Crisco. Yeah, they do tend to get sticky if you leave too much grease on them. But I got that stripped, and hopefully I'll get them on the pile with all the other things that I gotta get seasoned and run through the electrolysis bath. But yeah, my cast iron wok has gotten a little bit sticky sitting over the summer too because all the humidity, and I probably didn't get it wiped down quite enough with all the oil on it. Didn't get her wiped down good. So I can probably rescue it just by heating it up in the oven and wiping a little fresh oil on it. And that'll kind of act as a solvent, and then really rub it good and get all the oil off of it. Seems to be impossible to find pans like that in your area. Yeah, they can be tough to find. The Sydney I got at an antique shop. You know, the woman I get quite a bit of neat cast iron from. But I found this the favorite chicken fryer in a Goodwill. Well, no, it wasn't Goodwill. That was actually another secondhand store in my area, and they wanted a pretty good price for it. They wanted $65, which is, you know, fairly close to the to what they go for. Well, with a lid like that, they usually go for a bit more. But they do have one person there that actually knows a little bit about cast iron, so they tend to be kind of high on anything that's branded or looks really old or really neat, something like that. If that would have been a branded one, they probably would have wanted, 125, 130 for it, even at that secondhand shop, because that's about what they go for. Got something in my tongue. But anyhow, what else was I going to say? I'll probably remember once we get done like I usually do. Got it back through here. Dove Kitty, I didn't say hi to you. Sanudo, good to see you. Yeah, you like antique shops, but yeah, I mean, they're usually, you're going to pay pretty much full price for things in an antique shop, but they do tend to have a lot of the older stuff because they're an antique shop. And a lot of times you'll have a better chance if you're looking for something specific, or if you need a lid for something, if you need a lid for a particular Dutch oven, you're going to have a higher chance of finding it in an antique shop than you usually will, just randomly searching or looking at it. You can usually find it on the internet, but then the internet can be kind of a pain and you got to pay shipping for it too. So, how did I come up with the name Mudbrooker? Well, because I live in Mudbrook. That's the name of the area where I live. You won't find it on a map. It's just kind of a local name for this part of the country. And there's no real well-defined boundaries except for one. There's a state highway on the east edge of Mudbrook. One side of the road, you're in Mudbrook. The other side, you're not. Other than that, it just kind of depends on where you run across the last Mudbrooker. That's a lot of cast iron. Am I Midwestern or Amish? Well, I'm actually from the Great Lakes region here in northern Wisconsin. Technically Midwestern, but we don't admit to that sort of thing because then they tend to lump us with people from Illinois and Indiana, and nobody really wants that. Or even, God forbid, Iowa. Trying to figure out your 3-notch lodge. It's a shift marker that doesn't really look like somebody stabbed it with a pen and stamped an F to the left of it at the 6 o'clock position. F were usually, like letters, were usually maker's marks because a lot of times you used to pay piecework and you get paid by how many pans you cast in a shift. So you put your initial on it or something like that, so you could keep track of how many pans you had made. Stabbing it with a pen, well, they might have, something like that, because it's pressed in the sand, and he might have grabbed his little letter stamp out of his pocket and stuck it in and realized he had it backwards. Who knows, something like that. And it could also be that he has a pointy end on it as a tool, to scrape little bits of things here and there. Yeah, it's just kind of an idiosyncrasy of a pan. And sometimes they would put little dots, kind of poke little dots on patterns or in the sand to keep track of patterns they've been having a problem with or were getting worn, or how many times a pattern had been reworked. A lot of times with Wagner's especially, you'll see 2 or 3 dots on the handle, down by the base of the handle. You'll see 2 or 3 dots stamped on it. And that was some kind of factory means of keeping track of the particular pattern that pan came from. Nobody's exactly sure what it means. I tend to think it's how many times the pattern had been reworked, ground down, smoothed up, repolished. But I could be wrong. It could be some other mysterious reason why they do it. But yeah, you see things like that quite often, little kind of, scratch marks or things on the on a skillet that were actually made in the pattern to begin with, just as a marker for on the shop floor. I have a flea market in the area. One of the booths is a triple booth and full of cast iron and old stainless steel. Yeah, sometimes flea markets are really good, especially the big, big flea markets where a lot of people kind of specialize in things. Let's see. I'm in Ohio, so I feel the pain. Yeah. Yeah, nobody wants to be associated with Indiana or Illinois. I found a favorite cornbread the other day, and it has 11 slots. Wanted $10 for it. Did the electrolysis tank, and it turned out great. Oh, good. I haven't seen an 11 slot. Or is it more? Are they the actual corn cob shaped corn cobs, or are they just little kind of like half cylinders? It says corn stick pan on it. Because Griswold made ones like that. Usually the ones that are half cylinders, like a breadstick kind of thing, those are usually 11 slot. Got an itchy nose tonight for some reason. Thank you for teaching you so much. Well, you're welcome, Captain Kirk. It's always good to see you. Always glad to have somebody commenting on here. Pleasantly surprised how many YouTubers are in Ohio. Kind of cool if you meet up with them for a convention. Yeah, there are quite a few of them, actually, now that I think of it. Maybe here kind of something. Aren't you all known for a giant basket or something? Yeah, that's what's that, Lancaster basket company? They got a building in the shape of a giant basket. I think it's Lancaster. Somebody will have to correct me if I'm wrong. But we have the world's biggest muskie up here in Hayward. You can climb up through it, go up the stairs, look out his mouth over the lakes around Hayward. It's like 3 stories tall. Forget how long it is. I probably have answered this, but can't they make skillets like the old days today? Well, they can, and there are companies that do. They make fairly light, fairly thin, really machined and smooth and polished cast iron, but they're expensive. I mean, it costs a lot more. I mean, something like Lodge, they use an automated system for making their molds from the patterns, and it's automated casting, which is why they've gotten thicker over the years, because it needs to be a little bit thicker to accommodate the automation processes. And they saved a lot of money when they quit machining the inside of the skillet smooth, because when they're originally cast, I mean, Lodge skillets are pretty much as they come out of the mold when they take the sand away from it. They run it through a tumbler with corn cobs and a little bit of sand, and it smooths them up and polishes them a bit. But that texture is basically what you get right out of the mold. And in the olden days, something like this, like the Sydney, it's got such a nice smooth polished inside. That's because they would use a lathe or a grinder, a few different types of machines, but they basically machine the inside. Well, Lodge quit doing that in the early 80s as a cost saving measure, because they needed to compete with real cheap imports. And it did probably save the company, put a few guys out of work that were running the machines that they actually used to polish it on the inside. But, it is what it is, and they're still in business today. But there are companies that machine the inside of their skillets, and they're really, make them as thin and light as they can. But something like that, you're probably going to pay, $200 for a 8-inch skillet, or a 10-inch skillet, number 8 sized. So, you pay for what you get for, and a lot of times you can find vintage iron a lot cheaper than that. So, it can be done, but you're going to pay for it to be done. Let's see here. I have an antique cast iron 18-inch cauldron pot. Has a 15 on the bottom. They say it's 1880s. Any idea if that's correct? 1800s. Probably. There's a few things I should probably do, maybe not next week, but the following show. I should do a little bit on identifying skillets and older cauldrons, because there's a few things you can look for that will date them roughly anyway. Does it have a gate mark on the bottom is a big thing. Some of the bigger pots, usually most things that are gate marked are from before 1900, but some of the smaller foundries and some of the larger size pots and cauldrons, things like that, they did keep pouring them from the bottom with a gate mark up into the 1920s and sometimes even up into the 30s on some of the really, obscure makers and the really big pots like that. So, but if it has a gate mark, odds are it's from the 1800s, and you can tell. I don't have one handy, or at least nothing I can grab fast, and you can tell by the shape of the ears where the bail attaches. There's different styles over the years that kind of evolved, and you can usually date it, within a 20-year span. So I got a couple of old skillet or old cauldrons that I could show you. Like I said, maybe not next time. Next time I'm going to do a show with the on the auction site and show you some, how you can kind of scan through there and pick out the lots when they have 8 or 10 pans all together, and you can tell at a glance whether it's worth bothering with. But that's what I'm going to do next week. But after that, yeah, I think I'll do a thing on cauldrons. So definitely come back the week after next, and I'll show you some things. I got suckered into buying a few of those overpriced longer burger baskets. Yeah, I don't know much about them. They make baskets. Whether they're worth buying, I couldn't even begin to tell you. I done smoke breaks twice in my offset smoker. It turned out delicious. Now, how do I get the smoke off the outside of the pan? Can be kind of tough. I mean, it's kind of oily and sticky, and sometimes you get some soot. I would just give it a good scrubbing with steel wool and oil it down good and just let it become part of the seasoning. If you really wanted to get it back down to bare metal, you'd have to strip it, and you could, but if you don't have to, there's no real reason to do that. Yeah, I would just, scrub it good, get any kind of sooty stuff off of there, and just kind of leave it. Where does it all come from, and where does all my cast iron knowledge come from, and how long I've been collecting? I've always used cast iron, pretty much all my life. Ma had some, and my wife had always had quite a bit, and we used that pretty much exclusively. So I've always been around it, really collecting and restoring. I've probably been doing for 5 or 6 years, maybe 7, when I really started getting into it. And you just kind of pick up things as you go. If you find something interesting, you don't know what it is, you start looking things up. And even if you don't find what you're looking for, you still learned a lot of other things along the way that you just kind of pick up and learn. And, experience by doing things, how do you strip a pan? How do you restore it and season it and that sort of thing? You learn that by doing and looking around and seeing what other people are doing. So, there's all kinds of information out there if you just kind of look for it. Ask questions, if you think somebody knows something, go ahead and ask them about it. And, you just kind of pick it up as you go. There's some good reference books. I do have them actually here. There's these are made by Schiffer. Schiffer Company. There's the Book of Griswold and Wagner. They're kind of a price guide. They're way out of date for their prices. The newest version of these, I think, were published in the early 2000s. They haven't been really updated since for the prices. But there's tons of information in there. They show you all kinds of, the different things that were made by different companies. And they list some other ones. This one has Griswold, Wagner, Favorite, Wapak, and Sydney Hollow ware in it. And they gave you a little bit of history of the companies and a lot of different sort of pictures. And this is the book of Wagner and Griswold. You know, a lot of people call, you know, the red book and the blue book because that's the color they are. And they're real handy. You know, they tell you what sizes they made and what the markings are on them. You know, there's a little description of each thing. You know, and pictures, of course, of different stuff. And some of it's really cool stuff. But there is stuff that isn't in there that you won't find that, you know, it's genuine Griswold, Wagner, you know, Wapak, whatever. There's some things that they've missed. And like I said, their prices are way out of date, but they're really good for showing a relative rarity. If one size is 4 times the price of the other one, even though the prices are way low, the 4 times the price still applies because that more expensive size is a lot rarer than the less expensive one. Word on the street is that somewhere in the very back corner of a Goodwill is a dusty and cobweb-colored solid life-size cast iron of Mudbrooker. There could very well be. I will neither confirm nor deny that I've actually seen this and do in fact know of its existence. But I probably shouldn't tell you because what you don't know can't be forced from you under torture. Yeah, yeah, 3 cauldrons, need to figure out a date. Yeah, I have the ones I have a couple from the late 1800s. I have one that's a Jewett and Root, and that was somewhere between, I think, 1845 and 1865 is when they made those. And I have a couple of newer ones. And yeah, you can kind of tell by the shape of the ears, the shape of the pot, the shape of the legs is a big thing. You know, the profile of them. Some of them are, you know, round little peg legs. Some of them have kind of a triangular cross section. And yeah, I'll put that together and we'll do that the week after next. Assuming I'm not working, I should be able. I'm pretty sure I won't be, but I still haven't really got my schedule yet, so I don't know exactly where I'm going to be. But with this new job, you know, at least it'll be a lot more predictable schedule. So I won't be constantly wondering where I am and what I'm going to be doing the next day. You know, I can hardly remember your own name, let alone all of Mud's knowledge. Well, there's tons of things I don't know either. You know, I'm still learning. There's always tons of new things to learn. You know, I tend to know the most about things that I have. You know, I mean, some of the, you know, some different brands that I don't have. I don't have any Martin stuff, and I really like to get some. But, you know, eventually I will. And as you kind of look into the things that you have, you know, you learn more about it. And, you know, if you can actually handle it and see it, and, you know, and you can notice details and things about a particular thing, you know, when you actually have it, it's a lot easier to learn too. Man, have you ever found a Wapak that didn't look terrible? There's some that are kind of nice I've seen. You know, the ones I have are fair to middling. You know, but Wapak, they're notorious for sand shift. When you would pull the pattern out of the sand, making the mold, it kind of shifts and it kind of looks like a crack. You know, it's not really a crack, but you can see little waves and you can see where the sand has moved around when you pulled it out. And you see that on a lot of different things, but Wapak is really known for it. You know, might have been the sand they were using, you know, might not have been the most skilled workers that they had working there either. And yeah, some of the Wapaks, you know, they're kind of ugly looking, you know, but some of them are pretty decent too. So yeah, let's see, what do I have? I have an old Z logo, got an ARC logo. I kind of think they all do have a little bit of sand shift on them, but they are out there. most of their Indian head logo ones, at least all the pictures I've seen, look pretty good. I mean, they took a little more time with them ones, I think, but especially the early ones, when they were using other people's products as a pattern, using a finished skillet and just kind of grinding the original brand name off and trying to fill it in. A lot of them, they're pretty rough looking ones. What newer brands have you used and would consider quality cast iron brands? I don't have any of the the newer boutique kind of ones like Smithy. There's Field Company, Smithy, Finex, Stargazer, Butter Pat, and they all look real good. They're all real good skillets. I've seen a lot of good reviews for them, but I don't actually own any of them because they are pretty expensive. And even used, when you come across a used one on an auction site or something like that, they'll go for 3/4 of the new price on them because there's a lot of demand for them. And it's just kind of how it is. But how they're quality. Yeah, like I said, I don't have any real personal experience with them, but I've seen a lot of good reviews, and people seem to really like them, and they look like they're well made. I mean, you can kind of tell by looking at it. If it looks like a crappy pan, it probably is. And they've obviously spent some time and effort to make a decent pan, but beyond that, you can't really give you a definite answer. Also have one that has a Wagner and Erie ghost mark. Yeah, a lot of Wapak does have ghost marks on it. One of them that I have, it's not really a ghost mark, but it's a butter mark, and I'm pretty sure it was made from a Wagner skillet. Anyone else have a problem with the super chat? I don't know. Let me go look on YouTube to see if it's working. I don't know if you could super chat yourself. I'll send myself $1 if I can. Buy and send. That seems to have worked. Seems to be a delay. Yeah, there's the $1 I gave myself. There's Todd Malacote. Yeah, I don't know what happened to your super chat. Let me scroll back and see if I just missed it. See, I'm running just on StreamYards. If you use OBS, you can have a little voice announcement that pops up when somebody super chats. No, I'm not seeing it back here. I don't know what to tell you. If it shows up, it might show up. Yeah, check back in a few. Let me go on the YouTube side here now. I'll have a look over here and see. Huh. Billy Lee Lawton likes the screw-headed. I missed that comment. Likes the screw-headed BSR pans. Yeah, they would stick a screw in the pattern to mark ones that they were trying to mark. Set them aside for some reason. No, I don't see your super chat at all. Sorry about that, but I don't know exactly what's going on. That pan I found says favorite pico. I just thought it was a cornbread pan. That's what I've been using it for. In fact, I got it hanging on the wall here. Let me grab this quick. Kill my camera. I'll just shut the little door. There we go. my back. Is it something like that? This is a Griswold, right side up, yeah. Griswold cornbread pan. Yeah, but they're more like a breadstick sort of thing. But yeah, Wagner made something like this. There's a Lodge BSR that made them like this, and yeah, I think Favorite did too. So, is that that look like the one you have? Where'd my mouse go? But if it's a Favorite, those go for pretty good money. You know, I mean, they didn't make nearly as many as Griswold and Wagner did. They're fairly scarce, so they go for a pretty good price. So you really found yourself something nice. I have a skillet that's marked Made in the USA, number 8, 10 and 5 inch, but 10 and 5/8 inches. Yeah, that's a BSR Century series, and that's the way they marked them. Made in the USA, you know, contrary to what some people believe, if you were listening earlier, means that it's probably made, you know, from the mid 60s on. And yeah, because that's the way that BSR marked their Century Series skillets. If you look on the bottom of the handle, there should be a ridge on the bottom of the handle that goes all the way up into the side of the pan, and there's kind of a teardrop shaped cutout on the back side of the handle around the hanging hole. And that's usually the easiest way to spot BSR, even the older ones, the Red Mountain series, because of that ridge on the back of the handle. It's pretty distinctive. Subject change of a video on canning with the Presto canner was a lifesaver. You're now new to canning and very clear and concise and easy to understand. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's why I made it. You know, just, you know, try and, you know, watched a lot of other videos on using a pressure canner, and there's always seemed something like they kind of missed, you know, so just trying to walk everybody through it real step by step, and how to control your pressure by just using the temperature. It takes a little bit of practice, and if you can, once you know how to do that, you can run any pressure canner you want. And if you have one with a, you know, a jiggling weight, it's real easy. But if you really understand what you're doing and you can control it with a temperature, you know, I mean, you pretty well got pressure canning mastered. Oh, there you are, Reclusive Mountain Man. $20. Thank you very much. I appreciate it greatly. It's always nice to have super chats, and probably didn't thank Todd enough earlier for checking it out just to make sure it worked. And thank you much, Todd. And well, thanks to the Mudbrooker for giving himself $1. Let's see here. But yeah, it's getting to be canning season, so I get a lot more views on that pressure canning video. I think it's like 3 years old now, 3, maybe 4 since I did it. And yeah, it's pretty. You can usually tell when the gardens are starting to come in, because all of a sudden I'll see a spike in the views on that video. But you know, a lot of people have benefited from it, so I'm happy with it. The closest to vintage Lancaster cast iron. I don't work for anything, but I live 3 hours. Yeah, that's another name, Lancaster. And then there's Marquette ware. They make that down in, I think, Kenosha, Wisconsin. You know, they're a newer brand like Lancaster. They've been around for a few years. And yeah, I've heard of Lancaster, but I haven't actually seen any of it. But I hear pretty good things about them. Route 417, $5. Thank you very much. Thanks for the info on the 18-inch cut. It has 2 gate marks. Yeah, that, you know, it's a pretty safe bet that it is from the 1800s. And like I said, you know, the week after next, I'll dig out my cauldrons, get them all in a pile here, and show you a few things, and get a decent little slideshow going, so I can show you stuff that I don't have for identifying the ears. The ears and the feet are kind of the two big things that'll really help date them. Homestead Gen. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is a BSR. Yeah, and yeah, it has a little ridge on the back. Homestead Gen, $20. Thank you very, very much. Thanks for answering all your questions. Love learning from you. Well, I'm glad to share what I know. And in the process, I tend to learn a lot of things that I don't know. Asking questions, or like somebody mentioned Lancaster cast iron. I don't really know much about them. I've heard of them, but this guy says it's good, so it might be something worth looking into. Or if I ever come across something, I'd be more likely to grab it because, oh hey, this guy mentioned Lancaster. And if you have any information that you want to share, feel free in the comments or something like that. Because everybody benefits from spreading information around. Unless, of course, you're dead wrong, and then people point and laugh at you for being silly. But, and I've learned quite a few things. For a long time, I don't know where I picked it up, but I must have learned it somewhere, that there was a 2-notch lodge skillet. But there wasn't. And the thing is, I have one. So I assumed that, well, it was a thing. Well, it's not. They went from 1 notch to 3 notches in the heat ring. And the 2-notch one, if you look extremely close, you can just barely see that it looks like the notch on a 3-notch lodge got filled in somehow, either in the pattern or in the mold. And it filled in just about perfectly. So, I mean, you really have to take a magnifying glass and look to see that it isn't quite right. But for a long time, I was sure that there was a 2-notch lodge until I finally figured out, somebody mentioned, well, no, there isn't, really, and looked into it more. Still can't remember where the hell I learned it in the first place. But no, there aren't really 2-notch lodges. There's not lodge skillets that have a notch filled in, but they never deliberately made them like that. So yeah, you kind of learn things, and you got to be willing to be corrected if you learn something that you know or thought you knew was wrong. Which kind of brings us back to the start of the video when I was complaining about people who are just rigidly dogmatic in the things they know or things they think they know, and they insist that they're right and can't possibly be any other way. And if you fall into that, well, you're really cheating yourself, because you deny yourself the chance of learning from your mistakes, because, well, you don't make any mistakes because you know exactly what's going on, and what you know is gospel. So always be willing to, question yourself, or question your things or if you learn something that's contradictory to what you know, go ahead and look into it and see if you can find out. You might be right, but you're probably wrong. I mean, people usually are. When you're wrong, you're wrong. But don't be afraid to be wrong. That's the only way you actually learn things. Your 1-notch lodge in the garage now, stripping back down to bare metal. All right. And yeah, I'm going to show you next week when we do the show, I'm going to show you that ARC logo lodge mine again, because that kind of enters into it. And something just kind of tickled me. I never heard of Lancaster, but I looked it up. Looks like nice thin wall stuff. Yeah, like I said, I've heard of it, but I never really seen it, so I don't know much about it. But yeah, it might be something worth looking into. And if I ever come across one, I'll definitely grab it. Learn when we fail or are corrected. Yep. Fast fail, spoken like a true engineer. Fast fail method. Yeah, I usually find out if you're wrong pretty fast doing some things for a living. Time to start up the wood cook stove. Well, not yet. I mean, it's still plenty warm out. I mean, we're usually up in the 80s yet this time of year. But it's coming fast. September ain't far away. You usually get our first frost mid-September, and the bottom kind of drops out of the temperatures. Then you start getting highs in the 50s and 60s, which is what I prefer. But pretty soon we can get the wood stove going again. I got to get all the junk off it. That's the problem with horizontal surfaces in my house. They tend to get to be a catch-all. So, but I'll get that cleaned up and get her ready to fire up for another year pretty soon. And in a couple of months, we'll be cooking on the wood stove again. There's a bunch of little things that I want to try, and got to try to remember some of the other things I was going to do with it last year, but never did. But that's kind of half the fun of it. There's always something else out there. I remember anything in the internet is fact. Absolutely. I read it on Twitter. It must be true. But anyhow, we've been at this for an hour and a minute so far. So I'm going to wrap it up. Next week, I'm going to do a show on the Goodwill auction site. Going to look at lots of pans. Not lots and lots of pans, but lots. Usually, a lot of times they'll bundle together 4, 5, 6 different pans. A lot of times you'll have 3 pans that you don't really need or aren't really very good, along with one thing that you want, which is kind of how I ended up with quite so damn many pans over there. But a lot of times you can get some pretty good deals on it, even on fairly new pans. Like sometimes you'll find a half a dozen Lodge skillets, and you can get them for a good price. So we'll get into that next week, and I'll show you a few different things and a few ways that you can kind of skim through fast and pick up quick just from the thumbnail a lot of times, whether it's worth looking into a little more, clicking on it and checking it out, or whether it's something you can just ignore and go on to the next one. But anyway, aluminum video. Yes, I'm going to do my aluminum video soon. I keep promising. I hate making promises and kind of should really quit trying to tell people what I'm planning on doing next, because that's usually the kiss of death. If I say I'm going to do something, it'll never happen. But yeah, I am going to be doing the aluminum video. That's the next on my list, as soon as I can actually get to the list. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the stream, and thank you to everybody who contributed to the super chats. I really appreciate it. And that'll help me buy more cast iron and play around with other things. So I'll see you guys next week, and have a good night. There it is. End.